Hey everyone, it's Nabil and David again with the Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus YouTube series, unofficial. We are just going through some points, especially from the book Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, that we hope will be helpful to you as you are reaching out to Muslims, or if you are yourself a Muslim considering Christianity or the truth of Christianity and Islam, and you think you already have it figured out, you just want to hear what the opposition might have to say, or if you're actually looking into this to learn what the truth is, we're glad you're here. We're hoping to share some information with you. This video in particular, though, we're going to go a little bit back into our past. I think it's absolutely critical when you're talking with anyone and trying to share with them your heartfelt beliefs that you develop a relationship with them. I think barring extraordinary circumstances, your goal should be develop a relationship, develop a friendship, and in the context of a long-term relationship, you can then discuss these things. And emotions will flare at times because you're talking about things that are sensitive to people, but the relationship can bear the burden of those kinds of emotional flare-ups. And so, in this video, we're going to talk about our relationship and the importance of relationships in general.
And this is the reason this is important to bring up is, we do public debates, we make videos, we post things, and it's easy if you're watching a debate to say, oh, this is the preferred approach. Whereas what we're about to talk about now is our preferred approach, right? You can't you can't do something like this on YouTube. In other words, if you're talking to people on YouTube and reaching tens of thousands of people, you're not building friendships with all of those people. If you're if you put out a book, you're not building friendships with all of those people. What we're saying is, if we could choose any approach as the best possible approach, it would be building up a friendship over time, and that's important because, as Nabil pointed out, if you're talking about people's most heartfelt beliefs, you're going to get, if you're seriously talking and not actually just avoiding things, if you're actually communicating your views on these topics and you disagree, that can lead to some very heated exchanges. And if you have a friendship that can endure that, then you can bring those things up. And I'm saying this because, Nabil and I talked about the most sensitive issues you can talk about between Christians and Muslims, the information about Muhammad. We talked about those things. But if you're just talking to some Muslim you met for the first time and you say, hey, Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl or something like that, it's not going to continue. He's going to think, oh, this person hates me.
Not the best approach.
Yeah, by the time we're talking about those things, if I bring those up, Nabil, whatever else he knows in life, he knows I don't hate him. He knows that when I'm bringing something up, it's because I believe he's wrong and I'm trying to show him. And when he brought up a point about Christianity, I understood it's not because he hates me. It's because he wants me to be on the right path. So we're doing this out of mutual concern. We want what's best for each other.
I want to reiterate something that David said too. It's, a lot of the people you see online are debating. They're presenting arguments. They're doing things that look very, cold and mechanical. The reason why, though, is because that's what you can capture on YouTube. And so that's what people see. And so people see me and my presentations on Islam, like, why do you hate Islam so much? Why are you constantly coming after Islam? And it's, well, you don't see the recordings of me having friendships with Muslims and talking about things with them over the context of years. Same thing with David. He's got a ton of debates, he's got a ton of videos, and he believes everything he says in those videos. It's not that we're trying to disown those, but that's a small part of a much bigger picture. And so we're trying to give you a little bit of insight into the bigger picture. What we both believe is a preferred method of discussing these kinds of issues, and that's in the context of a relationship. And so, just to give you a little bit of background, I met David in 2001. We were on the public speaking and debate team.
This is right about the time of the September 11th attacks. So
yeah, I would say
Islam became a very interesting topic very quickly.
Yeah, I'd say about 3 weeks before 9/11 is when we met for the first time. And then, you see someone in a class, you don't immediately become friends with them. And it was over the course of a few weeks that I started becoming friends with David. And at the same time, 9/11 happened. Immediately as a Muslim who believes that Islam is a religion of peace, who believes that Islam is the true religion, you're kind of pressed into a corner. Of course, you're pressed into the same corner everyone else is pressed into, which is are we vulnerable? Are we as Americans vulnerable? Is our way of life going to change now? All Americans were pressed with that question. But Muslims in particular were pressed with another question, which is, do I now have to choose between my identity as an American and my identity as a Muslim? Or if not, and for almost everyone the answer was no, you don't have to choose. How do I navigate between the two? Do I disown any violent Islam? Or do I somehow explain the violent Islam? Do I embrace the violent Islam? And of course, the vast majority of Muslims would say, no, we don't, at least Muslims in the West. And so that was the position that I was put in at roughly the same time I was meeting David. And so
I remember you after that you like spread an American flag over your car.
Oh man,
to let people know. Yeah.
we were scared as a Muslim family. Just all of a sudden being in the crosshairs of American dialogue.
Did your parents tell your sister to like take her hijab off just so she wouldn't be identified?
They told her to come home and stay
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
They told us to both come home, but especially my sister, because she would wear the hijab when she was out in public. I remember my dad went to Home Depot and tried to buy every American flag they had. We had American flags in our yard, on our cars, on our windows, just to let people know, hey, we support America. My dad was a 24-year U.S. Navy veteran, so he wasn't just saying that. He actually served the military for 24 years. I remember him going out to sea to defend our country. And so that was through and through who my dad actually was. And so, in this moment of crisis, not only were we dealing with the same crisis all other Americans were dealing with, we also had to deal with the crisis of telling our countrymen, our fellow Americans, hey, we're a part of you, while at the same time defending our Islamic identity. And so that was pretty difficult. Mm-hmm. And David wouldn't make it any easier on me. We'd be watching CNN.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is after this isn't like, first day stuff. This is like after we became friends. But we became friends so quickly that, I would, of course, be showing Osama bin Laden on TV, and I would yell, hey, Nabil, your uncle's on TV. And he would run out, what's this? And then
it would be Osama bin Laden. I'd be like, you jerk.
And then, so he would say, well, Hitler's your grandfather. And then I would run out and go,
you got to fire back.
Nabil called my grandfather Hitler. You all see this? And so
that's David. So so as you can see, we were real friends. We became real friends in the course of these conversations. It wasn't just about the religion. Like, of course,
that is the way it started.
It is the way it started, actually.
We met when you came to join the team, but we didn't really talk. We went on the first trip, and then ended up sharing a hotel room. And I was actually over there because again, this is 9/11 time. Even back then, it's more so now, but even back then, you had to worry about being called a bigot or something like this if you start talking to Muslims and start criticizing what they believe. But I was over there. Nabil's putting his stuff away, and all I knew about him then at that point was that his name was Nabil Qureshi, so I knew he was a Muslim. And at that point, I don't know if he's secular or what. And so we were sharing a hotel room, and then I see with my peripheral vision that he's putting away his prayer rug. So okay, he's at least devout enough that he's taking his prayers seriously, even on a school trip. But other than that, I was over there. I was doing my Bible in a year reading. And I was praying, God, if you want me to talk to this guy, please let him start it, because I don't want people to say that I started it and I'm mean. So please let him start it. And very soon after that, you said, so are you a hardcore Christian? And that...
Because he's reading his Bible. Now, I as a Muslim had never seen somebody read their Bible in their free time. Like, I knew Christians read the Bible, but I figured it was something they did out of obligation or something they did through cultural heritage. Not actually, you've got a few minutes free at the end of a day on a tournament that you've been busy all day, and so you pull out your Bible. I had never seen anyone do that, and so I figured, David's a special kind of Christian, like he's hardcore Christian. Mm. And I had been taught my whole life that the Bible had been changed, right? So as a devout Muslim in the West, you're going to be raised with an inoculation, basically, against Christianity. It's not passive, it's very active. Muslims in the local mosques, generally speaking, of course we're generalizing, we have to generalize when you're talking about a whole religious group, but generally speaking in the West, Muslims who are devout are not just taught, hey, this is how you are to be a good Muslim. They're also taught, this is why you're not supposed to be a Christian, or this is why Christians shouldn't be Christian, this is why their religion is ridiculous. And by the way, I often heard those terms, Christianity is ridiculous. in multiple contexts, not just in the mosque I went to, but in other mosques as well. And that's a whole other discussion for another day. But we truly believed it. Part of the reason why we believed it was because we believed the Bible had been changed, that it had been corrupted over time, and it no longer says today what it used to say.
And so we spent that first weekend arguing and really messing ourselves up from staying up all night discussing these matters. But Nabil explained to me everything he believed. He shared his criticisms. He shared his view of Islam. He told me that Islam was proven true by history and logic and science and mathematics and everything. Everything points to the truth of Islam. If you actually examine it with an open heart, you can't miss it. And even though we were stating our beliefs and disagreeing with each other, that wasn't the end of it, right? We didn't part ways. Oh, we really disagree with each other. There's no way we can get along here. We realized, hey, we're both in this for the same reason, right? We both want to know the truth about God, and so didn't end there. We spent years studying.
Yeah, I would say at the end of the night, what was accomplished was that I had met a Christian who had investigated these questions. The average Christian that I had encountered up until that point in time, if I were to ask them a question about the reliability of the Bible, and specifically textual integrity, has it been changed or not, they would have nothing to give me. Maybe they would have a name to give me. Hey, read Josh McDowell's stuff. But they would have no evidence themselves, no argumentation themselves. And so I now encountered someone who not just had thought about these things, but had thought about them enough that he was able to, on the spot, share with me some reasons why he thought the Bible was reliable, and some other issues as well. And more than the argumentation itself, the sheer fact that a Christian had studied it and was willing to stand up for it, the sheer fact was powerful to me. It was like, oh, wait a minute, there actually is something to consider here. Again, I didn't think it was significant. I didn't think his argumentation was powerful. I just thought, but wow, there is something here. And that was quite a bit of a shocker for me, believe it or not. I today know tons of Christian apologists in various fields. I'm talking media studies, philosophy, historical studies, archaeological studies. I know Christians who defend their faith in a variety of fields. But there's a first time you encounter it, right? And that was my first time, and it was an eye-opener for me.
And so it was a little after that I realized that we were actually becoming friends, because we spent the weekend arguing and staying up and having discussion, and it was later, so we left that tournament. We ended
I think
that trip.
That's important to briefly comment on, because you might be thinking, you argued all night. How'd you become friends?
Yeah.
The reason why was because I realized his faith was important to him and my faith was important to me. So we were arguing because of common values. Now his were Christian, mine were Muslim, but that bonded us. And so I understood him. I understood him a lot more than I would, a Western liberal New Age, person our age, in college. Here was someone who had strong morals, who had a belief in an absolute God, and so I understood that, and we were connected.
And matter of fact, along those lines, at the first night we spent arguing and discussing these things, after Nabil had explained his view of Christianity and Islam, I asked him, I said, all right, I know what you believe now. You've explained what you believe. If you're wrong, do you want to know it? And that's an important question to ask, because some people don't want to know it. I would say roughly half of the atheists that I talk to when I ask that question say, no, I don't want to know the truth about your God. I don't like your God. Something along those lines. Nabil said yes and no. He said yes, because I would want to know the truth about God, but no, it would crush my family. It would destroy my family. And so that was a glimpse into the importance of family relationships in Islam, which I actually had to struggle with that over the years. Now, I could have told my parents I'd become a Martian Buddhist. It wouldn't have made a huge difference as long as I was being good, right? That's what they really cared about. But this family bond, even after that first trip, we were away for like 2 or 3 days or something like this. We came back to the airport, and your mom hugged you in the airport for like 5 or 10 minutes straight. And I was thinking, I got out of prison. My mom didn't hug me for 5 minutes straight, right? And you're gone for a 2 or 3 day trip. The reason I say I had to struggle with that over the years is, I mean, we're constantly discussing and arguing about things, but in the back of my mind, seeing how close Nabil and his family were, how close he was with his mom and dad and sister, it's always in my mind. If belief in Islam is really as big a deal as it seems right here, if this guy ever listens to what I'm saying, if he ever considers an alternative to Islam, that is really going to crush these people that he really, really loves. And so, now I'm saying this because, lots of times in the West, we tend to think that, non-Christians, they're like drug dealers and prostitutes, and their lives are all messed up, and they've got horrible lives, and then they're going to become a Christian, and everything's going to be better, right? You're going to be better once you know Jesus. You're going to be better once you're involved in a good church, and life is going to get better. For lots of people, life got way better for me after I was a Christian. But for lots of Muslims, it's not like that. I mean, it's better in the sense that he mentioned that he would know the truth about God. But at least at first, I mean, your whole system comes crumbling down. So I was seeing that even on those first couple of days when we're meeting, and then later in the airport, and then of course we got back and we have our first meeting afterwards, and I was having a dispute with my partner, a duo partner. We do duo presentations, and we really just did not get along.
Again, this is for the public speaking and debate team.
Yeah, and I didn't want to continue and stuff, so I told her, I said, I don't want to continue this, and she went and told like the president of the team, and because they were friends and stuff, and the president of the team, instead of addressing me directly, stands up and announces to the entire team, if someone has a working piece and is winning awards, you should never break up with that partner, and anyone who breaks up with a partner when you're winning awards is blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, Nabil, who's brand new, right? I mean, these people who were already there knew each other. Nabil, who was brand new, and whose, of course, reputation is still in the balance, stood up and says, well, I think if anyone has a problem with a certain person on the team, you should go to that person, talk to that person, instead of blurting everything out in the middle of a room. And so I was sitting there like, whoa, I'm the big mean guy. I'm not the one that people don't come to my defense, right? People don't come to my defense.
Well, I was honestly, kind of surprised that this is the way things would be handled.
On a communications team, on a team that's based in communications, right? You think they'd be better communicators.
It was very clear. This girl had a message for David, but she was so passive aggressive that she would rather announce it to everyone angrily than just talk to him about it. And so. For me, I'm a pretty straightforward guy. If you have an issue with me, come talk to me.
So anyway, that was cool. I was thinking, oh, okay, this guy, he doesn't just believe in Islam and like to argue a lot. He will actually stand up for what he believes is right. So that was cool. And then
just briefly, David said something about having been in prison. There's a whole story, but David was a sociopath. I could even say murderous sociopath. Before he came to Christ,
you can watch that. You type in why.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to link to that on this YouTube page.
Okay.
So if you're looking at the description box, I will link to his testimony.
And by the way, that's why I had already known something about the origins of Christianity and apologetics when I met Nabil, because I'd gone through a similar problem. I was an atheist, ran into a Christian. Similar story. First Christian I'd ever seen, just sitting there reading the Bible. But this is in jail. Started arguing with him. And that's how I got started. And so
it was David's atheism that led him to be a murderous sociopath.
I had mental health problems. Just to be clear, I had mental health problems. So it was the combination of those two. It was me having mental health problems, violent urges, and then nothing in my worldview that would prevent me.
But I mean, and that is true. Mm-hmm. But if the average person was able to divorce themselves from their emotions and just follow atheism to its logical extreme, they would come close to what you did.
Well, I mean, they might not be violent. I'd say what you would come down to is do whatever you feel like doing and whatever you can get away with. And if you happen to really feel like being a nice person, then do that. If you're angry and you don't like people and you want to bash someone's head in, then why not do that? If you think you've got a chance of getting away with it. I didn't get away with it.
So short tangent. I just wanted to make sure we dropped that. I did not put that in Seeking Allah Finding Jesus, because it would distract from the flow of the storyline.
Mess up your flow.
And David hadn't publicly released that information during the first iteration of the book. This is the second iteration of the book after it became a New York Times bestseller. Zondervan gave me a little bit more leeway to add stuff that I wanted to put in here. So there's 10 expert contributions in the end of the book that they let me put in here, which wasn't in the original version, plus an extended epilogue. Anyway, one other thing that I put in here was a link to David's YouTube video about his testimony. Definitely worth the 40-minute watch. So anyway,
we became friends after that, and
so David had a bit of a criminal background to him, and he was introducing me to crime.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was it. I learned very quickly not to commit a crime with little goody two-shoes here. It was something small. I was sitting in the forensics and debate room office one day, and Nabil steps into the office, and he's giggling. And I go, what are you giggling about? And he goes, I just passed a sign. It said, academic freedom isn't free. And I thought it should say, nor dumb, right?
Freedom?
Yeah. If you're going to say freedom ain't free, you should say
not
nor dumb, right? You can't
true.
just include the free, you have to include the dumb. So he's just giggling about that because he likes stupid like word plays and things like that. So but you know, we're friends by then, so I go, it can say that. I got a Sharpie right here. And so so we walk back out there. Now I don't want to be defacing. Yeah, I don't want to be defacing school property here. So I say, look, there's only one direction that a professor could come by here. So it's around that corner. So you stand on the corner and give me a signal if someone's coming. So I go over there and I start writing in the Sharpie, you know, making it match and stuff. I'm writing nor dumb. Right? I'm sitting there and I'm doing this, and then a professor walks right in front of the Nabil, right over to me, looks at me, sees me writing, and walks out. And I go to Nabil, like, what is your problem? And he goes, I've never done anything like this before. Like,
I froze. I didn't know what to say.
He totally froze.
Even in retrospect, I don't know what I could have said.
You caw, something like that, right? Any sort of signal, anything. I would have taken the hint. The freezing is not the answer there.
Boy.
So no crimes with Nabil, and don't take classes.
Oh yeah, that was a bad idea too. So when we met, I found out that he was doing biology and I was doing pre-med. And
it's so perfect, right? Here we are, good friends. We can take classes together, be study buddies. It's going to work out.
So we took genetics together, and I would say probably a bad idea.
Yeah. I think you absorbed some information I learned. I mean, we had to be in class, but I did not learn anything from the actual talks. I would go back and read my book for the test and so on, but in class, no, didn't happen.
Yeah, I had already studied genetics on my own. I was just really interested in genetics, and so the classes weren't doing that much for me. But we made it through the class. We both got A's. And so the decision was that the following semester we would do evolutionary biology together. Or was it vertebrate zoology? It was one of the two.
It was the professor who taught evolution. I don't remember if that was the evolution class, but she had this really spiky, weird hairdo. It looked like a hedgehog. Like Sonic the Hedgehog.
It looked like it was going to attack you. The hair was about to come out and get you.
So we sit down on the first day of class, and Nabil starts writing the evolution of Dr. Kilburn's hair on there.
You gotta say her name.
Oh, whoops. It's okay.
That may or may not be her name. Any likenesses to humans actually existing is entirely incidental. But no. To be fair, she was definitely antagonistic towards theism.
Oh yeah. In her classes, she would talk about it. It was even in order to answer a test question correctly, you would have to deny like theistic views and so on. And she had a big Darwin fish in her.
And so I was like, what's her issue? Like, teach what you want to teach, but don't bring theology into it unless you're open to discussing both views, right? And you're open to letting other people present their views. Don't like force a certain theological view down somebody's throat in a biology classroom.
And so that didn't work out very well because with her spiky hair.
So I kept making these comments.
We realized, we weren't gonna. We would have still aced the class.
We would have made it, but I mean, it was not a good idea.
It was a huge waste of time. I was not going to be able to pay attention.
Yeah, we would just crack each other up in the back of the class,
so we stuck through that, and actually met my future wife, my present wife now, but my future wife, while we were arguing about the resurrection. We were going on another school trip and talking about we were arguing about the resurrection. Nabil was arguing that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. I was arguing that he was. That's what we were studying at that time. We would go over to Nabil's house, lay out our arguments. We would write them out, and then we would go through them point by point to see who had the stronger case. And we went on the trip, and we were arguing in the airport. And a new girl on the team, she just joined the team. Well, she was going on the team to see if she wanted to join the team. She wanted to go see what it is we did. And Nabil and I were arguing about the resurrection. She steps up and says, she starts telling us that we're both right. And what she meant by that was that all religious views are sort of equally valid, whatever's true.
And when
for you.
somebody says that, it means all religious views are equally invalid.
Yeah. She was an agnostic, but it's basically, whatever you believe, that's true for you, sort of thing. But it's interesting because Nabil and I both turned on her, and instead of arguing with each other, it was, what are you talking about?
Like he's saying Jesus rose from the dead. I'm saying he didn't rise from the dead.
Those are the only two possibilities.
How is that equal?
Someone's right and someone's wrong. Under no circumstances are we both right here. And anyway, enjoyed arguing with her so much that eventually married her.
Well, that was an interesting case study. It's, Islam and Christianity are in a lot of ways much closer to each other on the theological spectrum than further apart. You of course have very important differences, and my friend Abdu has coined a phrase that I think he coined it, but he said, the differences make a difference. And that's absolutely true. There are differences, those differences are important. But that said, if you're comparing Islam to Buddhism, Christianity is going to be much closer to the side of Islam on that comparison. If you're comparing Islam or Christianity to atheism, Islam and Christianity are going to be much closer. They're actually very close in the theological spectrum.
Yeah, monotheistic faiths. You're already dealing with just a few, and then monotheistic faiths that proclaim that God has sent prophets and messengers and revealed scriptures to the world. That's an even smaller number. And then if you're agreeing with all kinds of things about Jesus, that Jesus is born of a virgin, that he's the Messiah, that he lived the most miraculous life in history, you're down to Islam and Christianity as far as having that much in common. Now, Christianity has other things in common with, like Judaism has a ton in common with Judaism, but as far as that kind of overlap on Jesus and the things he did, lots of common ground there with Muslims. But the areas of disagreement just happen to be the core doctrines of the gospel. When the apostles go out and preach the gospel, it's Jesus is Lord, he died on the cross for sins, he rose from the dead. That's the core. That was the takeaway message according to the apostles of Jesus. And if you go to Islam, if Muhammad's coming along preaching, it's, hey, you Christians, you believe in one God? So do I. You believe that God sent messengers into the world? So do I. You believe Jesus was born of a virgin? So do I. You believe he lived the most miraculous life in history? So do I. You believe he's the Messiah? So do I. There are just these three little things we can't agree on that you need to change. Jesus isn't Lord. He didn't die on the cross for sins, and he didn't rise from the dead. Now, if we could just get those out of the way, then we're good.
Again, just to reiterate what David said, tons of things in common between Islam and Christianity, but the three things, I'd say the three things that stand out the most that they disagree on are the death of Jesus on the cross, his resurrection from the dead, and the fact that he is God. Those three things are the most important beliefs in the Christian faith.
And so if you're comparing Islam and Christianity, now as far as, before investigating them, since they don't teach the same things on core doctrines, they can't both be true unless you are declaring yourself Aristotle's nemesis or something like this and going against the law of non-contradiction. You basically have three possibilities. Either Islam is true and Christianity is false, Christianity is true and Islam is false, or they're both false. And if you're looking at that, if you're just looking at those three doctrines and comparing them, you basically have either Christians for centuries leading up to the time of Islam got their most fundamental basic doctrines wrong. They were wrong about the takeaway message of Jesus. Somehow the core message, they messed that up. They got the part right about him being born of a virgin, according to Islam. They got the part right about him being the Messiah. They got the part about his miracles being right. They got all that right, but they got the core message of the gospel. They got all that wrong. Somehow it was corrupted over time. It's either that, and Islam is true, or Islam is a corruption of Christianity. In other words, Islam picked up some things, and the reason it has things in common is because it absorbed those from, Middle Eastern Christians and Jews and so on. But it's actually a corruption, either an accidental corruption, like Muhammad was just listening to some weird Christians, or something darker and more sinister. And the reason you might want to think that is because if you look at the New Testament gospel and you pay attention to the message about false prophets coming and so on, I mean, you couldn't come up with a more perfect example of someone who says, guys, I agree with you on almost everything, just these three core issues of the gospel. The Christian response in Muhammad code, if Christianity is true here, then the Christian response should have been, we've been expecting you, right? We've been expecting you, Muhammad, because you are the perfect example of someone who's come along to change the gospel. So for you Muslims out there, those are the two possibilities. If you want to say Christianity or Islam are on the table here, either Christians got their fundamental doctrines wrong somehow, or Islam got the doctrines wrong.
So if you're going to investigate these things and have a fruitful investigation, and I think that's important, I think the foil of having two different people is important, because every time I ran up against a hard truth when it came to Islam, and we'll talk about some of those in the videos following, if I were by myself, I would just drop it and walk away. But if I have a good friend who's there who says, no, you can't just drop this and walk away. This is important. You need to answer it. You need to figure this out. And I'm going to keep coming back until you do. So I think you need to have a dialogue partner when you're going for the truth, especially if the truth may potentially be a hard truth for you. But if you're going to do that, you have to have a relationship. You have to have a relationship in order to be able to do that. There were times when David and I would literally slam the door and walk out on one another and say, we're never going to talk about this ever again. Right? I remember that happening.
We got pretty mad on a bunch of occasions, yeah.
I remember it happening on
Mostly
two.
due to him.
No. I remember it happening on 2 occasions, but for some reason I actually remember 2, but I feel like it happened in more than that. But we had to get back together because we were going to class together, or we would drive together, or.
And there's if you're talking about Christians and Muslims, again going back to the similarities, when both believe that God is sovereign, that God ordains things, that God puts us in positions for a reason. If you're a Muslim and you're in a room with a Christian and you become best friends, you have to be thinking, maybe Allah put me here to talk to this guy. And if you're a Christian, right, you're a Christian, you're over there praying, God, if you want me talking to this guy, let him start it. And then he starts it. You have to be thinking, maybe we're put together for a reason. And so you can't just, that's not the sort of thing that you can give up lightly, right? If I believe that God put us in a hotel room together so that we can get to the truth, that's not a relationship you just casually cast aside when you get on each other's nerves. And that's something that you should keep in mind. If you're a Muslim with Christian friends, you're a Christian with Muslim friends, that should be in your mind that you guys aren't atheists here. You guys aren't atheists and thinking that you're just friends by coincidence or something like that. That God can put people in certain places for a reason. So you should encourage each other to be obligated to get to the bottom of things and to let your friendship carry you through, no matter what.
So, and I actually believe that's what Acts 17 says, that God has put us in specific times and places so that we might reach out to him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. I think that's scriptural. And as a Muslim, I saw it as my honor to be able to tell David about Islam and to share the true monotheism with him. And so that was my impetus as a Muslim, his impetus as a Christian. We developed a relationship. And so we're going to wrap this up soon. In the next video, we're going to talk a little bit about varying approaches to reaching out to Muslims. If you are a Christian and you're watching this, we're going to keep that one much briefer. This is going to be the longest video by far. I just wanted to share some insights into our relationship and how we became friends. We've maintained that friendship for 16 years now. Just to recap, a relationship is the preferred approach, at least as far as both of us are concerned. We truly believe that developing a long-term relationship with someone that you're trying to share your beliefs with is the best approach. Yeah, you can do great stuff on a street corner. You can do great stuff on YouTube in a public debate setting. But by far the best approach would be finding the Muslims in your area, and those who intersect regularly with your life, and instead of just ignoring them, which is not good, or looking at them, with eyes askance, which is also not good, actually engage them, be real friends with them, and share your beliefs in that context. And just one more brief thing to add to that. You're not loving them for the sake of converting them. Because if that's your motivation, then when they say they're not going to convert, you're going to drop your love for them. And that's called an ulterior motive. That's not true love.
You love Muslims because they're created in the image of God, and as Christians we are called to love everyone, right? So absolutely, you love them for that.
Christ first loved them, and so we love them. Out of love for our God, we love all people.
And so you're preaching the gospel because you love them, right? And not I love you because you're a missionary opportunity here. You're preaching the gospel because you love them and you want what's best for them, and you want them to have the relationship with Christ that you have.
And should they say, I'm not going to convert, which I said to David, of course, and should people say to you, hey, stop spending time on this person, they're not going to come around, which people said to you, right?
Christians said that to me. It was Christians usually saying it. And I mean, because there's a reason for that, right? I mean, there are Christians who have sort of a Billy Graham crusade mentality, right? Where you preach the gospel and you preach a 10-minute gospel message and thousands of people come down, and those are the people who responded. I'm not knocking that. There are people that is effective with, but the people that is effective with are people who they already believe it, right? They already believe in the Bible. They already believe that Jesus, died on the cross. They believe those kinds of things. They've just never made a commitment. And so they hear a clear presentation of the gospel and they say, you're right. If I really believe this, I do need to commit. And those are the people who will come down.
For the most part. There are some people that the Holy Spirit completely turns around and convicts. But for the most part, that's the case. And
so if we have it in our mind. Look how quickly people can come to the gospel. Look, you've been spending years talking to this one Muslim. Think about all the atheists you could have been talking to. Think about, my wife, it was like 2 weeks. It was like 2 weeks and she was a Christian. She was an agnostic. Like 2 weeks later, she was a Christian. And there are lots of people like that, it might not be the 10 minutes, but it's a couple weeks. With Muslims, you might be talking about years. And so the idea is, it's like...
For me, it was 4 years. For my good friend Abdu, it was 9 years.
So the idea is this is taking so long, right? You can be doing much more work elsewhere. And my attitude, again, went back to that. No, I think we're here for a reason. And if we keep having it out and I, keep showing him that Jesus is who he claimed to be, and we're talking about Muhammad, if he keeps coming back, I believe that God is here in this. And so, no, can't back off something like that.
And so your relationship should withstand the ups and downs, and it should be for the sake of the person, for the sake of Christ. That would be my last bit of advice. Anything else to add before we go to our next video? All right, thanks guys so much for watching this one. Our next one will be on understanding of the various approaches that might work for you and for the person you're trying to love and minister to. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.